Obama on August 23, 2009, to serve as the California State Director at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA Rural Development. She brings over 25 years of experience working on public policy development and program implementation, supporting rural development and sustainable communities to the agency. She is our ambassador. She is our evangelist. She is our savior. to the government savior. I'm so grateful that we have people like Glenda working in the government on our behalf, especially supporting the efforts of rural communities and making sure that they get a fair crack of the whip when it actually comes to economic development in the communities. Last year, she was a part of a team of people, the California Financial Opportunities Roundtable, and a report came out from that group in August of 2012 called Access to Capital. What she's going to do this evening is explain a little bit about that report and provide us with an update to that, of which we'll be more than familiar with some of the financial instruments and tools that she's going to be talking about, but some of them will be very new, and she was explaining some of them to us this afternoon, and we were very excited to learn about some new things that are on the horizon, some not so new, but just quiet to us. So without further ado, I introduce Dr. Glenda Huniston.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, I'm just going to be back here, so hopefully I'm not in the way of the screen there for folks. So actually, that's about the second half of my conversation tonight. The first half is to share with you some of the major initiatives we've got going on around the state that will support your efforts and that we hope you can get involved with. And then the capital will be to finance all that. First of all, just for those of you who aren't familiar with California rural development, we are the agency at USDA that does not finance on-the-farm production. That would be the Farm Service Agency. We've also got other sister agencies out there like Natural Resources Conservation Service that does a lot with air and water and soil quality conservation type work. Food safety, food nutrition, Ag Research Service, 29 agencies at USDA. We are the agency that really is kind of the financial bank and lead for anything related to rural development. Everything between the farm and the fork, or in some parts of this state, between the forest and the furniture, as we like to say. I'll give you a little quickie on some of our programs here. Last year, we were able to bring about a little over $1.3 billion into California in our programs, and currently I'm managing somewhere over $8 billion in our portfolio. I don't have the current number, but I hope to have it soon. Our business and cooperatives programs are quite a few. Several of these are grant programs that can finance things like workforce training, feasibility studies, helping develop industries, a host of things. In fact, we have been financing North Coast Opportunities in several of their efforts, as well as items here in Lake County too through the years. Right now, in fact, the Rural Micro Entrepreneur Assistance Program is available for proposals. We just released that RFP last week. That's where we provide a grant to an organization who's then going to assist entrepreneurs get moving. We also help organize cooperatives. We do rural energy. I'm not going to go into detail about any of these because, quite frankly, I did leave a catalog of our programs on the front table, and you should always just go to our website and check out tons of information and talk to one of my staff, because the reality is they know the details and how to access these programs way better than I do. We have staff scattered around the state in 18 field offices, as well as our state office down in Davis. They are in those offices to help you access these programs. They're not there to keep you away from them. They're there to help you get them. We also do a lot of community facilities, almost anything that is a public type building or body or activity. We fund a lot of first responders, libraries, childcare, schools. We've done food banks, just all kinds of stuff. A lot of health clinics around the state. We also do rural utilities. In fact, many of the small communities around the lake here that have upgraded water or wastewater systems in the last 20 years, we've probably been the ones financing that. More recently, we're doing a lot with broadband. A couple years ago, we celebrated our 75th anniversary of rural electric. We're the agency that put electricity out to the U.S., and now we're trying to do the same with broadband. And we also do a lot of housing. People aren't familiar with USDA doing housing, but we do a lot of housing. Single family, both direct and guaranteed loans. A lot of self-help housing, which is one of my favorites, where we work with an organization that gets a hold of land and gets the sewer and water and other services in there and parcels it up. And then 8 to 12 families build their own homes over the course of about 10 or 11 months. It's really one of my favorite programs. We do a lot of multifamily too, mostly seniors, disabled, very, very low income, a lot of rental assistance for particularly seniors disabled in rural areas, and then farm labor. And by the way, our definition of farm labor has been expanded to include much of the processing too as farm labor, so housing for those folks as well. I did bring a handful of these reports and throw them on the front table for anybody that might want them. This is really kind of my guidebook right now. In January 2010, we did 43 forums around the state where we really went out to folks just like you and said, what do you need to have sustainable communities and jobs and economic development in your area? And we heard from you, and this book is just really the compilation of your recommendations. And it's literally a to-do book when you look at it. And it's online on our website, so if you don't get one here tonight, you can always look at it there.
Is it in libraries?
Probably not. Probably not.
Is that PDF that was sent?
I don't know.
No, it's not. This is before.
Did you send the Capital one?
Yeah.
Okay. And we could get you this PDF if you like.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. And again, it's on our website too. This is a lot of bullet points that say do this with maybe a paragraph underneath it. I am using this as my guidance on what to do in this job. A year after we did that, January through April of 2011, I personally held a town hall meeting in every single one of the 58 counties in this state, which you can do in 3.5 months if you do 2 counties per day every single day. And then you collapse for a week or two. What I wanted to do, because I don't know about you guys, but it drives me crazy if I'm you and I come to a meeting to a government official and say, here's what I want you to hear, and then they leave and you never hear from them again. You don't know if they heard you. They don't know if you're doing anything. I went out and said, okay, hey, here's the book. And we printed enough of these to give every single person one of those town hall meetings. Here's the book. Here's what you told us. Since then, we've met with groups. We've put together initiatives. We've applied for grants. We've got projects going. Are we on the right track? Is there anything else you want to add? And we didn't actually get much added, but we actually picked up a lot of new partners. So what came out of that was several things that I'm going to share with you real quick. One is a really serious effort with our economic development community to get them to focus on our existing businesses thriving and growing and opportunities for entrepreneurs. I don't know about the rest of you, but one of my pet peeves with the economic development community in general is they spend almost all of their time and their money on recruitment. Probably because it's a lot of fun to go play golf and wine and dine CEOs and spend money lavishly to try to bribe them to bring something in here that's got 200 or 300 jobs, right? And once in a while they win, once in a while, and that company stays a couple of years till they've used up the bribes, and then they go to another city that's willing to bribe them. Our state and local governments nationally for over 15 years now have spent $50 billion a year bribing CEOs to move from one place to another. And personally, I'm just not sure what our nation can show for that. Rearranging chairs on the Titanic is what I would describe it. The Public Policy Institute of California very much was concerned about this, did a study a couple years ago that shows very clearly less than 2% of the job growth in this state comes from that kind of recruitment. Most of it comes from existing businesses and new companies. Now, for those new companies, trying to understand what they need, Kauffman Foundation does some of the best research out there on entrepreneurship. It's pretty obvious for a company to start or even to expand, knowing where to begin, and often that's how to get through the regulatory process, and financing are the two humongous issues they need. So we put a lot of energy into that. One of the things we've tried to do to help with that is regional industry clusters. helping a region identify where they've actually got some opportunity, some growth. And it's really fascinating. People that do these studies and they start digging around in the numbers often come up with stuff that really surprises regions. In fact, to the north of you, Humboldt, Del Norte, Mendocino County, Trinity have been doing some amazing research on this, and they're quite shocked at some of where their growth industries are. We identified these as ones that my agency has funded the last 3 years. In particular, you guys are part of a 5-county North Bay regional food system that several folks here have worked on. Biomass up in the Sierras, value-added livestock. The Fresno project is a special White House project to try to get federal agencies coordinating and working directly with the city government more. Renewable energy down south, dry forest up north, and there's a lot of other clusters out there too. These aren't the only ones going on in the state. For example, the California Workforce Investment Board has actually financed several cluster efforts. The Small Business Administration is financing one in the Santa Cruz, Monterey area right now, looking at ag technology, software, food safety type stuff, and on and on and on. There's many efforts working on this kind of thing. I want to explain for a second the difference between value chain and cluster, because a lot of people like to use those terms as synonyms, and they're really not. When you're working with value chains, they tend to be very linear. So in the food farm value chain, you have your fertilizer and seed, and you plant a crop, you grow a crop, you harvest, you process, you package, you distribute, you send it to a store, and a customer buys it. It's pretty linear. And when you're working with that, what you're really looking for is where are there missing links? Something that the chain's not really working. Blatant example around this state for the livestock industry, in particular, those trying to do grass-fed beef, organic lamb, free-range poultry, whatever, slaughterhouses. We don't have small, medium-scale slaughterhouses that can preserve identity of the animals going in. And it's a real challenge without that. So we're trying to find some creative ways to solve that. I'll get into that later. Clusters, on the other hand, tend to be where several sectors come together. So in the food chain here, you've got your food cluster around, say, agro-tourism and bed and breakfast and restaurants and you know, foodie type stuff. But you've also got a clean energy cluster. You know, we've got guys, Russ Lester down here producing electricity from his walnut shells, completely powering his drying operation. Gill's onions, they're getting power off of the waste from processing the onions they grow. Dairies getting methane from their dairy thing. A lot of clean energies, plus maybe a solar farm, wind farm, whatever. There's water technology clusters developing up about as people try to improve the technology and techniques about how they irrigate. And that brings in things like engineering and a whole bunch of other sectors. And over here, just to the east of you, out of Chico in North State, has been developing the last several years a specialized manufacturing cluster. And that's really important here in a minute. Back to food, though, for a second. A study that came out of our California community colleges, one of our very, very, very important partners here, just a couple years ago, looking at the agricultural value chain, everything that is in that entire chain, the jobs and ag potential there, found that if California would really seriously pursue opportunities in that farm to fork arena, the processing, packaging, etc., we've got the potential for 181,000 jobs within 5 years. Averaging, you know, almost $24 an hour. So a lot of groups, a lot of sectors, a lot of communities and regions are working very, 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 very hard on this the last few years. And we're seeing a lot of progress too. And by the way, that number takes into the account the loss of almost 30,000 farm worker jobs. That 36 number we think is a little high because the folks that did the numbers had a hard time distinguishing farm contractors from independent contractors, but the bottom line number is correct. And this gets back to some of your buy local type programs. You can see in the last 30 or 40 years here, the amount of money farmers have been getting has been going steadily down, while the cost of food in the grocery store is going steadily up. And that increasing distance there, that ag value chain profit, increasingly is getting sucked out of your communities. Every time people spend money at Walmart, those profits are going to Arkansas. They're not staying here. In fact, that's one of the reasons we really push this idea of a buy local program, how important it is. You spend $1 locally, 70% stays locally. You spend it with a non-locally owned business, only about 40% stays here. That kind of thing really snowballs after a while. One of the regions that's doing some amazing stuff along this line that could be working over here too is the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, SACOG. They did, a couple of years ago, they started up this rural-urban connection strategy and put a couple $1 million into it at this point. What they did was create this computer modeling system that quite literally flipped city and regional planning upside down on its head. So if you look at normal, like, general plan activities, your cities will have many different colors: retail, housing, industrial, whatever. And then everything outside the urban boundary is one shade of green. You know, it's just land waiting for something else to happen to it, right? Well, what they've done is they flipped that upside down. All the cities in those 6 counties around Sacramento are white, and the rest of the land is, I think, 30-some shades of color. They digitized every single parcel in those 6 counties by crops and cropping patterns, tied it into housing and labor and transportation and finance and water, and on and on and on and on and on, many different databases. And now they can do all kinds of what-if analysis that helps them plan and also helps them identify where needs are for investment. So, for example, if you've got a bunch of farmers that are wanting to shifting from alfalfa to prunes, you know right off the bat, you don't need as much water. Prunes don't take as much water as alfalfa, but they need more labor. Well, where's that labor coming from? Where's that labor living? Is there a need for more housing? Where are the processing facilities? If you need a new processing facility, where's their access to wastewater treatment? Where's the transportation? Where's the local markets? This allows them to play with that. Their goal, as they've been looking at their production and consumption over there, those 6 counties produce about 3.4 million tons of food. They consume about 2.2 million. So those 6 counties could not only feed themselves a very healthy, very good diet, and still have a lot left to export, right? But when they really drilled down into the numbers, they found that on average, the average plate in front of their average citizen has about 2% of the food on it from local sources. And that's double the national average. We did a study at USDA last year and found that on average, the average plate of food in front of any average citizen is about 1% locally sourced. Now, you know, there's groups like you that have that percentage way, way up. That's why I'm talking averages. But still, the SACOG region's goal is to increase that 2% to 10% in 10 years. And I think they're on track, too. They're doing some amazing stuff. In fact, actually, the really exciting thing for you, they are now in the final stages of taking that computer modeling system and taking it open source. It'll be free in the public domain within the next month or two. One of the things myself and many, many other people working on food systems are excited about is being able to pick up that free, extensively wonderful software and just move it over here into this region, work perhaps with our Code for America folks, others, volunteers, maybe time bankers, etc., to figure out how to easily get your local data into it so that you can start using that kind of tool too to facilitate regional food systems and other development. We work real closely with Cooperative Extension. They're one of our key partners. This is some work that the Extension folks did looking on how small and medium-scale family farmers could access different routes to get to institutional buyers, like the school lunch program or hospitals or you know, big institutional buyers. They do a lot of research on this, how we can make that kind of stuff happen. I mentioned, you know, missing links in the value chain. 2 of the biggest ones that impact every single attempt we have at trying to build a regional or local food system are aggregation hubs and commercial kitchens. And this is in every single area. They are the missing link, almost inevitably. The problem with aggregation hubs, you got to have them. If you're going to try to have the school district and the school lunch program serve local food, you can't have 50 farmers backing up 50 trucks to the door of the cafeteria every morning. Ain't going to work. Ain't going to work for you, ain't going to work for the school district. Somebody out there has got to be a place where that raw product can come, at least be washed, maybe chopped a little, bagged, and then sorted into some boxes. So like one box has onions and tomatoes and carrots, you know? Aggregation hubs, but the problem is they don't pencil out. We have been trying for 20 plus years to make these things pencil out. My agency has invested a lot of money in feasibility studies. We've invested money in aggregation hubs. And I'm here to tell you, we're not spending another penny on them, as is. What we are doing, we're reaching out aggressively to the food bank community and making the case to them that they need to start being the aggregation hubs for our local food systems. Because what is a food bank? Shelves, storage, cold storage, freezer, loading dock, truck. Sounds like an aggregation hub to me. And more food banks are actually purchasing raw product. In fact, in many of them, they'll tell you they prefer you to give them money so they can purchase. They get far more food for the buck than you putting a $2 jar of applesauce in a barrel somewhere. We've been financing food banks around the state. In fact, one of my shining examples down in Calaveras County, we helped them greatly expand their food bank into a new facility, much larger than they need. They have their local farmers storing product there. They host the farmers market on the food bank grounds, and they're starting to do transportation together. Because a lot of your small rural food banks are driving an empty truck into the closest large city to pick up donations, coming back full. Well, I imagine most of you farmers would rather be taking a full truck to that city and coming back empty. So they're actually starting to work out some of the transportation. Commercial kitchens, same thing. We can't make them pay out. You know, the example everybody loves to point out, La Cucina down in San Francisco, is heavily subsidized. It's about as close as you get to a break even, but it still is heavily subsidized. We're reaching out to people that have existing kitchens, and there are literally thousands of kitchens all over this state that could, with just a little bit of work, be certified commercial status, that are probably used 2 or 3 or maybe 10 days a month. Your schools, the Elks Club, churches, Grange halls. In fact, our shining example, just next door to you here, Willets, we financed the Grange hall there, upgrading their kitchen to commercial status. The local school district is their anchor tenant, so to speak. They use it about 70%, and then several entrepreneurs use it the rest of the time. That kitchen's in use almost 24/7. That's the kind of thing we'd like to do. In fact, we're interested. We've been talking to some actual school districts about them having their kitchens available for entrepreneurs. So that kind of thing, and we can help fund some of that. We're also looking at the fact that we have an aging farmer group out there. We need another generation of farmers. So we're doing several things about that. Among others, we provide some financing and funding for groups like FarmLink, the Farmer Veteran Coalition, ALBA. We work with a lot of groups that are trying to do training, etc., on farmers, and also help them get their hands on land so that they can start farming. We've got some websites that are full of good information. Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food. If you guys haven't been on that, you really should go check it out. It's got a great list of not only our projects, all the funds we have, but also everything else at USDA. And this new one, just a year or so ago, we started start2farm.gov. This is a partnership between USDA, Farm Bureau, and several other public and private organizations to try to put in one website all the information an aspiring beginning farmer would need. Like where can they find info on financing or networking or training. A really good website for folks. Everything I just said about food, I could say the same thing about woody biomass, particularly up here north. We're doing a lot of work in trying to find homes, new products, new opportunities for all that woody biomass that needs to come out of our forests, as well as when trees in an orchard are replaced, or vines, or walnut shells. A lot of biomass out there. Rice straw, and it's not just ag. As I said, it's the forest biomass, it's the ag biomass, but it's also municipal. A lot of this state has a lot of biomass resources. In fact, you can see for Northern California in your region, this is heavy-duty biomass resources. In fact, it's estimated we've got a potential of over 32 million tons right now available right now. And that's a conservative estimate of what's probably 80 million gross out there annually. This isn't one time, this is annual. So what we're doing a lot of work at USDA on this certified bio-based product. This is something we just released a year and a half ago. Secretary Vilsack. We actually certify the amount of biomass in products. We maintain a database, and in that database are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of products. You would be shocked at the variety. These are just a few examples I yanked out of California companies. There's over 300 California companies in that database. They're producing degreasers and, items that replace the glue and the urethane in pressed wood products, the little fuel things, plastics. Anything that is plastic that's been made from petroleum can be made from biomass. And increasingly, that's what we're doing more and more of. A lot of our USDA scientists are constantly finding new products. We've got a Coca-Cola bottling plant, I believe, I'm told up in Redding, that's already producing the plant bottles. And Coca-Cola and others have made a huge, huge commitment to converting all of their bottles to plant bottles soon. Made from biomass, fully biodegradable. There's over $375 billion a year market in chemicals, plastics, and rubber products, all too many of which are made from petroleum, which is not good for anybody, that could be made from biomass. And here in California, there's huge opportunities for that. We're working closely with our Ag Research Service on finding, the technologies and making sure that kind of stuff happens. And in addition to them, throughout California, we are blessed here with some world-class research and educational institutions. We're trying to get all of them to start coordinating with each other more. And the good news is they're really not stepping on each other's toes very much. They've all kind of carved out their own little niche they're focused on right now. So we're getting a lot of traction in doing this. And it really is helping move our efforts forward, which is very timely because 1 month ago, President Obama released this brand new program, Investing in Manufacturing Communities Partnership. And they're putting some pretty serious money behind this. 25 communities are going to be awarded a $200,000 planning grant. We've got our fingers crossed right now that 2 or 3 of the ones we helped with here in California are going to get one. And next year, 6 regions or cities are going to get a $25 million grant to facilitate U.S. manufacturing. Now, I am committing to you that California, particularly Northern California, is going to get one of those 6 grants. And to do so, we're working very, very closely with Innovate North State. This is one of the iHubs. The state government created iHubs this last several years. The only one of California's 12 iHubs that's focused on rural. And their vision for the next 5 years is to have the North State recognized as the most economically competitive rural region in the U.S. They've pretty much working with everything north of I-80. And we're working with them to take all this existing, this is 100 manufacturers that got top awards just a month or so ago at their big summit over in Chico. And a couple local ones to you here. There wasn't any in Lake County, but there were a couple winners over in Mendocino, so I mentioned them here. But we're working with them on their application to really focus it on the bioeconomy, which includes food. As you guys know, anything maker, the made in, anything maker, anything food, anything we were talking about, the plastics, all that's bioeconomy. Because USDA has been promised that at least 1, perhaps 2 of those large grants are going to rural. And they've already tentatively identified this group as a very strong candidate. Tied to that, another effort that's supporting it, last year for the first time, California had a state economic summit. And it was a very frustrating exercise, partially because it was organized in like 4 or 5 months, which was way too short a timeline, but also because we could not get people there to talk about anything rural. We barely got them at the end to talk a little bit about water. And that was the Fresno people pushing really hard, a little bit about water. This year, myself and many other people made a point of they held 16 regional forums. They split the state up into 16 regions, 16 regional forums. I personally went to 11 of those, and colleagues of mine went to all of them too. And we lobbied hard, and I'm pleased to say we now have as one of the 7 legally chartered action teams for the State Economic Summit, Working Landscapes. As we're pointing out, and as you can see, we're giving it a very broad definition of what a working landscape is. It's over $1 trillion of the state's economy. So the issues we're going to be looking at there, obviously support for city-centered growth, protecting our farmland. That's actually pretty good policy for 20 years now. Not that it couldn't be implemented better, but the policy's more or less in place. We're going to be really looking at ecosystem services, environmental markets. How do we start getting folks that are using services from working landscapes to actually pay for them? Largely urban folks. They're getting water off of the upper watersheds here, and yet they do nothing to actually facilitate those watersheds being healthy. So that kind of thing. Increasing investment in rural natural resource-based economies, and then making sure that our goods movement and our infrastructure serves rural instead of just urban. So those are what we're going to be focusing on. Then to get towards the end here, I'm coming to capital. This is the handout that or the PDF I believe you sent out. This is the book that Carol mentioned we published last year. And it's really exciting for us because we had about 100 people working on this. And when we started this effort, we thought we were embarking upon a policy initiative. We were going to identify what were the roadblocks to accessing capital and make some policy recommendations on how to fix those roadblocks. Well, guess what? We discovered there are more than 24 ways to access capital right now, functioning well and alive in California. Hardly anybody knows about them. So what we did is we really highlighted those, plus we also have a huge resource section in here. We've got like 10 or 12 pages of just resources listed. Different websites that have different organizations, books, things like that. And then we also highlighted some of the types of funding. We learned some lessons too. First of all, there is no single solution. We need microfinance just as much as we need some large regional funds that are focused out here and everything in between. And it's not just about the money either. Doesn't do any good to have access to capital if you got a shitty business plan. And even if you got a great business plan, that's not going to do you any good if your value chain is broken. And even if the value chain's working, if the goods movement can't get your goods to market or the tourists out to do agro-tourism here, you got a problem. We got to make all of this work. Scale is important. All the stakeholders have to be engaged. I'm just going to highlight a few of the things in the book. I'm not touching on all of them. In fact, I didn't even have a slide for time banks here, and I probably should have, because we actually featured it in the book as well. But COIN, the California Organized Investment Network. Has anybody ever heard of that? No, I bet not. I bet you've heard of Community Reinvestment Act, right? That's the requirement for banks to invest in underserved communities, of which all of rural counts, by the way. COIN is the same exact thing that the requirement is of the insurance industry. They have a requirement to invest in underserved areas. They tend to invest in infrastructure. But unless somebody puts their feet to the fire, guess what? They don't do it. Safe Bidco, it's based here in Santa Rosa, does a great job financing small businesses. I love this one. Tax-exempt industrial development revenue bonds. Who the heck would ever use one of those? Anybody here think you'd use that? Alvarado Street Bakery over in Sonoma County, fairly small little bakery. They just expanded their bakery and bought some new equipment using those. It's really amazing how people are getting creative using these different things. We highlighted cooperatives. This is a huge opportunity. People are getting very, very creative about using cooperatives as a way to finance, to gather financing together. And particularly businesses. You can get very creative with cooperatives. How many of you knew Ace Hardware was a cooperative? A couple people. For the rest of you, I would have to ask you, how did you think they were surviving Home Depot? Seriously, how did you think they were surviving?
Because they're here.
No, that's not enough. That's not enough. If their prices were way too high, you'd still drive to Home Depot. You would. People do. They are independently owner-operated businesses, but they formed a cooperative amongst themselves to do their bulk purchasing, their advertising. That's why all their ads look alike. And more importantly, insurance. You know how expensive insurance is. We're looking at that kind of stuff. Say that, remember that broken value chain of the livestock slaughter? You know, if that chain was working, the ranchers would make a lot more money. The butchers, it's a very well-paid profession, they'd make money. The cold storage, the transportation, the Whole Foods, goodness knows they would make money. The restaurants, everybody in that value chain makes money, except the slaughterhouse, because they got an economy of scale problem. To do identity preserve so that you know when this animal goes in, that meat comes out the other end, you got to be certain small. You probably can't harvest more than 10 to 20,000 animals a year. You just really can't and get away with it. To harvest 10 or 20,000 animals a year, that facility has almost the same exact overhead cost as a facility harvesting 1 million animals a year. That's the problem. So what we're looking at, a couple things. How about if we put a cooperative or maybe a public benefit corporation or something, an umbrella type something, over that entire value chain, and all those people that would make profit each gave a little of their profit to subsidize the slaughterhouse so that they could make those profits in the first place. So actually with our Central Sierra one, the value-added project, that's exactly what we're working with some folks down there to think about doing. We're also trying to find new profit centers. And you know, I'm talking about livestock here, but it goes for vegetables too. They got the same kind of broken chains. We're looking at how can we improve profit centers. So one of the cost centers in a slaughterhouse right now is the offal. They have to pay somebody to take that away to render. Well, about half of that offal could be biodiesel. Springboard Biodiesel over here out of Chico, working with Cooperative Extension, has identified that 1,000 head of cattle could produce $20,000, maybe even a little more, worth of biodiesel. Well, now that starts changing the penciling out too. But technology again. How do you separate the good offal from the bad offal? Well, we've asked ARS to look at that. So that's why all these things fit together. It's just a big old jigsaw puzzle most of the time. Direct public offerings. You guys are nearby two of our big winners here in the state. And there are hundreds of these happening around California. I love Mendocino Brewing Company's strategy. They didn't advertise this. They did not put one single word out on Facebook or internet or anything. They put little cards in the six-packs. And it was the drinkers that raised $3.6 million. They met their goal. Real Goods over here in Hopland, they actually had to turn money back. They raised more money than their target goal. They turned several $100,000 back to potential investors. And these are happening all over the state too. Another one, ESOPs. I love the concept of ESOPs, employee stock ownership programs. What about those aging farmers out there, those aging small main street businesses that maybe don't have kids that want to take them over? Well, what are those folks supposed to do? And they can't maybe sell them. And besides, you guys want them to stay locally owned. Swanton Berry Farm down in Santa Cruz has been slowly turning over ownership of its farm to its employees for better part of a decade now. The employees are taking a little bit less salary each year, and they're getting a little few percentage points of ownership each year. And it's just slowly transitioning. Jim Cochran, the owner, is mentoring them, helping them with their business plan. Pretty soon he's going to retire. He's going to get his cash out. So it's fair to him. It's fair to his heirs. And locally owned. It's great. And you got a bunch of new entrepreneurs too. We see a lot. This is happening all over the state as well. Another thing we're working on, corporate investment in shared value. Increasingly, corporations are looking for not only that socially responsible stuff, but they're looking for how they can actually invest in their own value chains. So they don't necessarily want to own every single business in their value chain, but they might be willing to invest in them. Because A, they know they can count on that value chain being there when they need it, and B, if it's a good business, they're getting a return on that investment. It's a win-win. We've got examples like Alcoa and Cisco. Actually, Sierra Nevada Brewing Company, one of our best examples in the state. They support virtually every single business in their value chain. Almost all of their value chain, to the degree they can, is locally owned businesses. It's fantastic to see what they're doing. We've got an MOU with the Council on Foundations. We're working with them to start leveraging their funds with ours. Obvious things like when somebody here is applying for a grant and you need match, well, couldn't your local foundation put that match up? Wouldn't that be a good way to leverage their dollars so you're bringing federal dollars in here? It's amazing to me when I meet with foundations, they don't even seem to think about things like that. And it's like, nah, come on, leverage the dollars. We signed this MOU. We're starting to do more and more and more of that. Plus, our foundations are really stepping up to the plate. One of my favorites is the California Endowment. They decided a couple years ago that they wanted to raise $90 million to combat food deserts. They were willing to cede 30 million of their own money, and then they were going to go raise 60. And they created this structure. But when they created this structure, they decided to do something very, very, very cool. One of the coolest things ever. They wanted that structure to be organized in a way that unaccredited investors, people like me, and I'm assuming all of you, unless you make over $200,000 a year in salary, or you have $1 million in liquid capital, which cannot count any equity in your home, if you have any equity in your home. If you meet either of those criteria, you are an accredited investor. You are considered intelligent enough to go invest your money any old stupid place you want to. Me, I don't make over $200,000, not even close to it. Even if I had a PhD in finance and I was, as a living, advising people where to invest money, if I didn't meet that standard, I would be considered too stupid to invest my money where I wanted to. That's the law. That's the Security and Exchange Commission. And what it means is here locally, it's almost impossible for you to invest in your locally owned businesses. Groups like Lions have to be exceedingly careful how they organize, or they run afoul of the law very, very quickly. But this is set up to do it. And what's really exciting is once they set this up and they got it running, accepts funds from a variety of sources. They've got over $270 million in that fund. In less than a year, they raised that, which to me and others show how hungry people are for this kind of opportunity. The other thing that's cool is they turned around and gave to us, the group that did that guidebook, the intellectual property rights to the generic structure itself. They wanted it in the public domain. They said, go forth and do good with this. So what you basically got here, in some ways, is almost like that umbrella I was talking about, a co-op or something like that. You can get funds from a variety of sources, including me. I can pick up the phone and tell the guy managing my IRA to shift 5% of my IRA into this. And that's important because I don't know about you, but I'm not doing a self-directed IRA. I don't have the time, I don't have the bandwidth, I can't think about it, I don't understand it, I can't do it. I need to tell somebody managing my money to do it. So my IRA, your banks, your foundations, your local government, a huge amount of county governments, particularly up here in Northern California, are hungry for a place to put some of their investment money other than Wall Street. It gets into this portfolio, and I don't pretend to understand exactly how this works. Then it can be financed into anything you want. We're personally recommending a geographic focus, not an industry-specific focus, because, what's the first rule of managing risk? Diversified portfolio? Yeah. You utilize your local existing infrastructure. You don't reinvent that because that would cost way too much. So your local credit union, your CDFI, your local bank, whomever, they're actually delivering, but we are working with a group to look at underwriting standards that are much more reasonable. Because right now, your big banks, all they look at is collateral. There's 5 C's of credit, like character and history and how you've paid your money and that kind of stuff. So we're looking at that. And just to give you a scale of what I mean by what we're looking at, these are not set in stone regions. These are just me pulling apart the state out of curiosity. I just wanted to see what the scale would be. So for you guys here in the North Coast, the 5 counties that we just did that regional food system, Marin, Sonoma, Napa, Mendocino Lake, in 2010, so the number would be higher now, but in 2010, if all the citizens of those 5 counties had brought home just 5% of just your retirement accounts, just IRAs, 401ks, nothing else, we'd have had $1.2 billion to invest in these 5 counties, in regional food systems and Main Street businesses and community development, infrastructure, whatever we wanted to invest in. Right now, we're working with groups in the Bay Area. The SACOG group, that 6-county group over around Sacramento, they're very serious. In fact, they've got a whole initiative called the Next Economy where they're looking at this. The Northern California, the 13 Northern California counties, I'm not so sure they're not going to be the first ones to do this. They're pretty serious, and we've had several meetings. And actually down in Fresno, the Fresno Business Council is looking at this because they've... some of you may have seen the Food Commons that was published a year or 2 ago, Larry Yee, Jim Cochran. It's a nice concept. Fresno Business Council, somewhat baffling, many of us are baffled, fell in love with it. They're looking at creating something like this too. San Joaquin Valley, those 8 counties, $4.7 billion. That's just bringing 5% of just their retirement accounts home. And the reason this is important is because, as I was telling the folks earlier today, a lot of people don't realize, particularly here in rural communities, just how the financial sector, well, you probably know you've been screwed, but I don't know if you realize to what degree you've been screwed. Let's put it that way. California citizens have put almost $1 trillion into Wall Street in just our IRAs and our 401ks, just our retirement accounts at this point, almost $1 trillion. And yes, California, I got into a big argument in Silicon Valley with a guy, because when I was talking about this, he's like, hey, California gets way more than its fair share of investment. We get a lot of investment back from Wall Street. I said, yeah, we do. And every single penny of it goes to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, and San Diego. Fortune 500 companies in our large metropolitan urban areas. The rest of the state, nada. Nada. Not a penny is coming back. So basically, your money, your capital, is sucked out of your community for Wall Street to play with, and they're sending it to Indonesia, or maybe LA. They're not sending it back here. So that's why we're so passionate about this. This is one thing I'm putting a lot of personal energy into. I want to create the kind of structure that would allow us to bring some of our own money home so we can finance our own communities and that infrastructure that make everything happen. And it's very feasible. We've got a lot of studies that show quite clearly equity capital, and for that matter, loan capital too, in rural areas is just as successful as metropolitan high-tech areas. Many studies showing this. This particular one, over 18,000 investments studied. They looked at jobs created, type of industry, length of investment, exit performance, return on investment. Every single measurement, rural did just as good as high-tech metro. That's important, because a lot of people don't believe that. So basically, to kind of wrap this up for you, what we're trying to do, and by we, I'm not talking just my agency, I'm talking all those partners I've been mentioning. Innovate North State, the iHubs, Extension, the economic development folks, the community colleges, the foundations, and on and on and on. The governor's office, GoBiz, they're working real closely. There's a lot of partners working on this kind of effort right now all over the state. But it's got to be a holistic strategy. It is not enough to have a good, strong buy local program. You need to buy local. You need to make sure the value chains aren't missing links, that your clusters are there functioning. You need to know what your clusters are that have the most opportunity. The infrastructure's got to be there, the goods movement, and then the opportunity to invest local. Bring some of that money home so you've got the capital to do all this. So last but not least, it's up to you guys. You know, it's you, me, all of us. It's up to us. We've got the knowledge, the experience, the networks. It's up to you whether or not this kind of stuff's going to happen. And the good news is that, like I said, there are a lot of efforts all over the state right now. There's a lot of folks here in the North Bay very interested in creating that kind of regional financial structure. There's people here looking at aggregation hubs, and Mendes Ukiah is looking at a slaughterhouse, and you know, on and on and on. The food banks here. You know, people are stepping up to the plate, just like your groups today that you were talking about, working together, focusing. We can make it happen. I thoroughly believe that. So with that, let me say goodbye and thank you, and just say I'm thrilled to be here, and I look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. I hope you all found that educational and inspirational and informative. The slides for tonight, I have access to the slides for tonight, plus the documents that Glenda mentioned, we'll provide via an email, or probably we'll actually post them on our website and on our Facebook pages. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. What I would like to ask is that Denise and Loretta are actually leaving tomorrow to go on a long journey back east. It's a beautiful journey that they're going to be taking. What I mean to say by that is also that we need help cleaning up. So if you wouldn't mind staying behind, and Denise, if you will, can you marshal the troops and tell people what to do and where to do it? We'd really appreciate some of the help if you can stay. So thank you very much for coming out this evening. I look forward to you getting involved in the Time Bank in Thrive Lake County. We're at thrivelakecounty.org. Have a great evening. Thank you. Oh, there's bug spray if anybody needs bug stuff.